thank you for this moment that we are in space and time. We guide and ask that you direct us here in our wonderful county, our wonderful community, to move through this very challenging time that we live in around COVID. We pray for guidance and leadership of this board, and we pray for the support of those who are in attendance here tonight, those across this wonderful family this week. We ask of this in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Dr. Alexander. The next item is the adoption of the agenda. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda as submitted? Ms. Campbell?
I make a motion.
It's been
I
moved.
do have
and-
one change on,
Sure, go ahead.
it's actually a correction on item H of the CAC report.
Would you like to pull that item?
Yes.
Okay. I would like, if you will indulge, to move under 9F, right after the approval of the minutes, move item 9F up. I'd like to hear from Mr. Jim Doughton, who represents us in Tallahassee in our lobbying efforts, and he will make a short presentation, and then we will consider item 9F if that's acceptable to everyone. And Ms. Campbell, did you have something else?
No, sorry.
Okay. Seeing no more lights, we're voting on adoption of the agenda as amended. Dr. Alexander, make sure your button is highlighted. You want to go up to the touch screen. Right here. There you go. Thank you. And it is adopted unanimously. The next item is public hearings. There are none. And then comes open forum. Do we have anyone who wishes to address us in the open forum? Okay, the open forum is now closed. We have some presentations. Mr. Woody, I will turn it over to you for presentations.
Yeah, very pleased to recognize staff who have done an outstanding job over this last year and received some national recognition for having done so. Each year, the National Association of Clean Water Agencies, or NACWA, you may be familiar with that acronym, sponsors a Peak Performance Awards program. This recognizes public wastewater treatment and water reclamation facilities for their outstanding records in compliance with their National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permits over the full calendar year. Those are our NPDES permits that we have at each one of our facilities. Last year, in 2019, the ECUA's water reclamation facilities were required to meet 13,020 compliance metrics for effluent discharges. Let me say that number again, 13,020 compliance metrics. That's an average of over 35 compliance metrics a day. These are considered to be some of the most difficult to meet in the state of Florida, and our three facilities met 13,019 of those, missing only one. Over the past 20 years, this was the best year for compliance in ECUA's water reclamation operations. The ECUA's Pensacola Beach Water Reclamation Facility earned a gold award for meeting 4,165 metrics and receiving that award for the fourth consecutive year. It hasn't missed a single metric in over 3.5 years. 3.5 years. Our Bayou Marcos Reclamation Facility also earned a gold award after successfully meeting its 3,570 metrics. This plant has received awards in 19 of the last 22 years. Finally, ECUA's Central Water Reclamation Facility earned a silver award after missing only one of its 5,285 metrics, demonstrating 99.98% compliance. And it's received awards in 5 of the 8 eligible years of operation. So we have some of our staff that are here that to receive these awards. I'm going to go to the podium, use the podium mic here in just a minute, and name them by name and pass along their award. And it would be remiss of me not to acknowledge as well their supervisors, Don Palmer, who's the head of that department, and Randy Sears, who oversees all of the plants. And the plant managers who will be receiving these awards on behalf of their staff will start with the Pensacola Beach Water Reclamation Facility, and that is Steve Rout. Outstanding work. At the Bayou Marcus facility, Sonny Bonds. And at our water reclamation facility, Kiafa Lee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Woody, and thanks to all of those who won the awards and the people who work under them who made that possible. We are very fortunate to have the quality of staff that we have working for the ECUA. The next item is the Recycle Star Award, and I asked Dr. Walker to pull a pen. And Dr. Walker, who is the lucky winner?
Madam Chairman, I've already looked through them, and the highest number is 16. I don't know if it's ever been reached yet, so I'm going to choose number 16.
Number 16 is Kevin and Kathy Spellman, so we will notify them that they win the Recycle Star Award, and I'm so glad we're recycling again. Item 7 is approval of the minutes of the regular board meeting of September 22nd, 2020, found on page 6. Does anyone have any corrections or additions? Ms. Campbell?
I have a motion to move.
You move approval?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any other comments? Not, please vote. Make sure your little light is lit under yes or no. There we go. And it passes 5-0. The next item is going to be item 9F, and we will recognize Jim Doughton. And Jim, if you'll come up to the podium and press speak. Jim has a longtime lobbyist in Tallahassee, and I think he is clearly one of the, if not the most respected lobbyist in all of Tallahassee. I'm a big fan of the work that Jim Doughton does, and he did a lot of great work for us in a year when there was not a lot of money to be found and spread around from the Capitol. So Jim, if you'll just give, or Mr. Doughton, sorry, if you will just give a report to the board members of
Thank you,
what's
Madam
going
Chairman, and with an introduction like that, it can only go downhill. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon. Chairman Benson and Director Woody asked me to just give a very short legislative presentation for you. And obviously, as a government entity, I won't talk about the elections too much, except to just remind you that since 1992, there have been over 20 million votes cast for president and all the elections leading up to that. And if you add all of those votes together, in Florida, there's been about 100,000 vote difference between the winner and the loser. So if passed as a prologue, I think you're going to see a pretty close election in Florida on November 3rd, one way or the other. In terms of prognosticating, obviously, I spend a lot of time dealing with members of the Florida legislature and the Senate and the House. I think it's safe to say that Neither chamber is at risk of losing. The Republicans are not in risk of losing control, so you're going to have a Republican-controlled legislature, absent something that nobody predicts, moving forward into the next legislative session. And in terms of process and timing, so the legislature, they're going to get elected or reelected, and they'll come to town on November 17th and get sworn in, and that's when they officially take office. Because of COVID, we do not anticipate that there'll be any interim committee meetings in the month of December. Moving on from that, though, the legislators come to town and they meet in interim committee meetings where a lot of activity gets done prior to the beginning of the legislative session in March. So that's really when they begin to build the budget. It's when legislation starts to get heard in the process. And so they're not going to have those December committee meetings. They're going to do it in January and February, and likely have a week on and a week off, so the Senate and House will not be there at the same time. Usually, they're there at the same time. They're trying to do everything they can, obviously, to have a safe environment due to COVID, and the Constitution requires that the legislature meet in Tallahassee, so that you can't have a remote legislative meeting. And much like I'm sure you have, they're trying to figure out how do you get 160 members into the House and Senate chambers. How do you have a committee meeting? What happens if it's a packed committee? How does the public have input? All of those logistics are trying to be figured out right now. The Senate contracted, for example, with Tampa General Hospital, who are going to bring up infectious disease experts and others to figure out how to have a safe building. Those of us that hang around in Tallahassee a little bit are hoping we get to go in the building. It'd be kind of difficult to do our jobs if we can't. I guess we will become even more frequent texters. But all of those decisions are going to happen over that November, December time frame. And then, of course, the legislative session will begin in March and hopefully conclude on time the first week of May. As you know, in the year after an election like that, they meet in March, but the next January, in January of 22, they'll meet in January. So everything starts really next year in September and then moves through that early legislative session. In terms of what they're going to do when they get there, obviously budget is going to take up a tremendous amount of time. Already in the current fiscal year, the state has decided it was going to reduce its revenue estimates by about $3.4 billion. And so far, so good. They've been meeting those revised estimates, the state has. And I think you can see it as the governor's moved us into phase 3. There's a little bit more activity. People are buying houses in Florida. People are buying condos in Florida. So actually, dock stamp revenue's up. But clearly, because we're so reliant on the sales tax, tourism is down, way down. Beverage tax is down, way down, and that obviously hurts the overall economy. So I think you're going to see a real focus on trying to have a balanced budget in the next fiscal year and trying to avoid having to do cuts to the current fiscal year. And the legislative leadership has done a really good job, I think, of keeping their estimates reasonable as well. The unknown question is what's going to happen with the CARES Act dollars. Florida has about $4 billion of unallocated CARES Act dollars. After the election, you're going to see whether government has the flexibility to spend those dollars on sort of existing operations rather than the COVID-specific expense. So can it plug a hole? And I think depending on what the feds say, that's going to really determine what the budget outlook is going to be. If they can spend those dollars to kind of help plug holes in various state agencies, the fiscal situation could be a lot less than what we're all sort of worried about. If not, it's going to be a very, very difficult year, similar to 2008, 2009, for those of you who remember the Great Recession and the impacts on Florida's economy during the Great Recession. So a lot still to be seen, and of course, everybody's sort of watching COVID to see what that looks like over the coming weeks and months. You're also going to see, no shock here, COVID sort of response and review. I think the legislature is going to spend some time, and hopefully in a bipartisan way, to look at what Florida's response was, what worked, what didn't work, and try to do that without the political theatrics, but really what worked at the Department of Health, how did testing go, what were some of the hurdles, so that we can learn from it and the legislature can learn from it and maybe change the law to sort of address it. Candidly, you look at the governor's executive power, most people think the governor's executive power happens during a hurricane. They don't think about what it's like during a pandemic, and the governor's given a tremendous amount of authority during a crisis when there's a state of emergency. But I think you have members of the legislature also saying, well, we want to appropriate dollars. We want to be sort of involved in that process. So I think you're going to have a COVID response. And then in our conversations with the House and Senate leadership, they remind me that they can walk and chew gum at the same time. And so while they're going to talk about COVID and while we're going to face a huge budget situation, there's also going to be other pieces of legislation that are going to get looked at. Some related to COVID, like telehealth, right, that seem to work okay. Are there any additions to telehealth in the healthcare space that need to be looked at? But then all the other functions of government, whether it's in the environmental area, the transportation area, infrastructure, and education. So it's going to be a different session. It's going to be different in the way we interact and different in some of the challenges they have. But I do anticipate you're going to see sort of regular legislation move through too. It's not going to be 100% COVID related. So with that, Madam Chairman, I'm glad to turn it over to you and glad to answer any questions.
Sure, and Dr. Walker.
I take it that with that much of a budget reduction, an anticipated reduction, it'll be a very tight year for any money for local projects.
Yeah, I think once we see what sort of happens with the COVID dollars and the flexibility with the COVID dollars, but yeah, I think even with that flexibility, it's going to be a difficult year for local projects. I think that's a fair assumption to make right now. The real question is if there's a project that has been funded, if you're in year one, if you receive funding in year one, you get to make a little bit of a stronger policy argument. And I think the agencies are going to have a role in sort of ranking that. The other thing I didn't mention, we don't know who's where yet. The other announcement that's going to be made in December is who chairs what committee. So the Speaker and the Senate President get to announce that. We don't know, for example, who's chairing the Transportation and Economic Development Appropriations Subcommittee or the Justice Appropriations Committee or the Judiciary Committee. All of that won't be decided until December. And I think that's when we'll have a little bit of a clearer budget picture and also know who our advocates are and who we can talk to, where they wind up. But yeah, I'd err on the side of caution. I think that's a fair statement, Doctor.
Mr. Perkins?
We got an appropriation for Brownsville neighborhood for some sewer infrastructure and expansion last session, and when COVID came along and we started having some real budget difficulty, I was pretty certain that was going to be vetoed. How did we manage? What strategy did we use to manage to avoid a gubernatorial veto in that situation?
Well, I always give credit to your local legislative delegation. So Representative Andrade was the sponsor of the project in the House, and Senator Broxson was a big supporter in the Senate. So I know that they were working hard with the governor's office. Number one. Number two, the project itself, I think, stood in pretty good stead with DEP, and because it was septic to sewer, that's something that's been incredibly important to Governor DeSantis. So it sort of fit within that wheelhouse. But you're right. The governor vetoed about $1 billion in projects, and our project was unscathed. Obviously, we were briefing the governor's office, the folks in the Office of Planning and Budgeting, folks on the plaza level about the importance of the project. But when you're cutting $1 billion, I was very pleased to see that this project remained unscathed.
So what is your strategy, Mr. Doughton, in the upcoming session? What will your ask be? How will you approach our issues?
Well, the first thing we're going to do is talk with Mr. Woody and staff to determine what Phase 2 of the Brownsville project looks like. And I think obviously we're going to advise that a reasonable ask is a good ask. It's not going to be in the millions. I suspect it's going to be at the same dollar amount, or at least that'll be our recommendation. The second thing we're going to do is talk with the DEP a little bit and let them know we're coming back to get that agency buy-in. And frankly, we're going to know a lot more when the chairs are announced. Oftentimes, one of the challenges of representing a local government is that if your local legislators happen to be a healthcare person or a education person and you're worried about funding for an environmental project, the person you really need to educate may be a legislator from Daytona Beach or from Key West. It was Key West this past time, as you know,
right.
Madam Chair.
Yeah.
So we need to see where folks line up, and then, and obviously, you know, the appropriations process is tough, and there's as much, there's a lot of policy, but it also helps to have, you know, good education and frankly, good relationships at the end. It's, you want to be around the Capitol during those final hours when there's a little bit of money to be found, and just trying to shoehorn in what you can.
So, obviously, we're concerned about appropriations, projects like the Brownsville, but we're also concerned about sort of legislation that might undermine our mission in some way. You know, there are always rumors that South Florida is going to go after our water and so forth. I assume you monitor those things as well.
Yes, ma'am.
And will you keep us apprised so that we can do whatever we can from here, contacting and help us with a strategy for doing that?
Absolutely. One of the things you'll see in the new proposal before you, and something that was important to Mr. Woody, I think, is to have a good line of communication. It be a little bit broader than just the appropriations ask, so we can advise you on sort of the lay of the land and who's what. We also monitor several pieces of legislation, and there's a bill tracking and a weekly report that or biweekly, I guess, report that we're going to be providing during the legislative session, and then frankly more meetings like this. So yes, the answer is yes, and I think you're going to hear more and more detailed reports.
Yeah. Ms. Campbell.
Yeah. First off, thank you for being here.
Yes, ma'am.
I was one of the ones that pushed really hard for us to get a voice in Tallahassee. And I was there last year and found out just before I went with staff that there was a movement afoot. There was a Senate bill to do away with reclaimed water disposal through spray fields. And I know that that's something they worry about down in South Florida, but I just want to make sure that doesn't come up and bite us, up here. It was kind of strange that our representative didn't know anything about it until that day. And we walked all the way through to the Senate floor with it. And the guy assured us that they would have a cutout for Northwest Florida, but that's one thing I'd like us to really keep a look at, to make sure that they're not doing away with spray fields, because there's no other way up here for us to do away with all that water.
Yeah, I agree, and I recall that issue from the last legislative session. I probably wouldn't, the legislature, if you're not sort of in that silo and have that issue sort of in front of you, it's not uncommon for one of your local legislative delegation to find out about it a little bit later in the process. But I think we can certainly help with that.
The week before, he was in the newspaper about putting a pipeline into Eglin for Santa Rosa County. So when it came to light, he was very, very interested, so we walked right through too. And he was kind of upset that he hadn't been notified, that it was even a Senate bill and going through. So, that's something I'd like for you to keep an eye out for us on. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. And I think overall, I think you're going to see your legislative delegation is getting more senior in the process as well, and some new faces. So I think I'd encourage everybody to make sure you're talking to your local legislators here in their hometown.
Yeah, and they're very good, easy to talk to, and easy to work with, and very helpful always to us.
Yes,
Thank
ma'am.
you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Dr. Walker?
I can assure everyone that a topic such as spray field policy is a rather esoteric subject to many legislators, or at least to some. I guarantee you, and I'm sure Mrs. Benson could back this up, that there are legislators who have no idea what a spray field is. So it takes a lot of education on some of these subjects.
Yeah, that's a fair point, and I think it's important to remember when these folks get elected. I always say, you're the school teacher from Seminole County, and you get elected to the legislature, and you get appointed to the healthcare committee, and all of a sudden you're supposed to be an expert on Florida's $35 billion Medicaid budget. It doesn't work that way. That's our job, right? I mean, that's our job to let them know what our issues are. It's your job back home, and it's my job as an extension of you. But we cannot assume they wake up every day and worry about ECUA. We cannot assume they wake up every day and worry about, a particular issue that we have in mind. That's our role. It's a lot. They have a lot to shoot at. There's no doubt about it. That's a fair point. And they hate acronyms. We all should remember that, too. I try never to speak in acronyms if I can help it.
Ms. Campbell?
Governor Bush always said that. He said, stop the acronyms. Let's explain this to normal people, citizens who can understand.
I wholeheartedly agree. I love that. I hate the acronyms. But I would like to remind, I know that 3 of the board members have been here and go over and talk to legislators, but remind the 2 new, that we need to keep them abreast of every situation. I've already made an appointment to meet with the new Michelle, even though it's not my district, but I've made an appointment to meet with her and tell her some of our issues and, what's going on with us. So if we all do that, then it's fresh in their mind when they go over to Tallahassee.
It's a great idea.
And as Mr. Doughton said, our legislative delegation was very helpful in the Brownsville thing.
Absolutely.
But unless we have someone from our area on key committees, they're not in the loop on these issues. The key person was from the other end of Florida last time. Unfortunately, I knew her and had access to her. But, we have to have someone whose ears are to the ground and alerting our legislators when it's necessary. So I appreciate all that you've done. Mr. Woody?
As Mr. Doughton said, it's not only a matter of being well in tune with our local delegation, but understanding what legislators from across the state are in key positions on key committees that have some influence on subject matters that are of interest to us. So that may entail not only Jim and his team keeping us apprised of what their positions are and who holds those areas of influence, but our ability to, in interest, to travel and speak before a committee or make some comments so that we're known as an entity. And if we don't do a little FaceTime, then we're doing ourselves a disservice.
And we're all going to figure out what FaceTime looks like over the next few months, but that's exactly right.
I see no more questions, so we will now take up item number 9F, which is on page 47, a general resolution authorizing the execution of a consulting agreement with Metz, Husband, and Doughton, PA, for governmental, legislative, and regulatory services for fiscal year 21 in the amount of $38,000, and the execution of addendum number 1 for February through September 2020 services for $22,162. Is there a motion? Ms. Campbell?
I'll move the recommendation.
Ms. Campbell moves resolution GR 2060. Is there a second? Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? If not, we are voting on General Resolution 20-60. Oh, Ms. Campbell, did you wish to speak?
Oh, no.
Okay. Please vote. And it passes 5-0. Thank you, Mr. Doughton, and I know you have a long trip, so we'll let you get on the road, and we'll look forward to all that you'll do for us this year. Okay, we come now to item 8, a report of the Citizens Advisory Committee. Ms. Campbell, you are recognized.
Thank you. The Citizen Advisory Committee met on October 20th. Item F was adoption of the General Resolution GR 2036. It's on page 17. General Resolution authorizing acceptance of bid and award contract, authorizing Executive Director to execute contracts with multiple vendors for replacement vehicles and provide an effective date. Committee voted 9-0 in favor. Item G was adoption of General Resolution number GR 20-40, a general resolution authorizing Executive Director to reach and sign a grant agreement with the Florida Department of Environmental Protection for design and construction of reclaimed water system on Pensacola Beach and providing an effective date. There's that reclaimed water again. And the committee voted 9-0 in favor. Move to item I, adoption of General Resolution GR 47, which was a general resolution authorizing the retained easements along Interstate 10 between US 29 and Interstate 110 to be no longer useful, necessary, or profitable in the operation of our utility systems, approving and concurring in the findings of the Executive Director, declaring the easement to be subordinated to the Florida Department of Transportation and providing an effective date. And the item passed 9-0. Item J was adoption of General Resolution GR 2048, a general resolution authorizing the extension of the maintenance contract with Central Square for SunGuard software support through December of 2021, and the item passed 9-0. Item K was adoption of General Resolution GR 20-49, a resolution authorizing Executive Director to sign an engineering services proposal from HDR Engineering, Inc. for design of a granular activated carbon treatment system to treat the water from the Muldoon and Avondale well sites, authorizing those funds to come from CIP Project W001N, GAC filter vessel maintenance, and it passed 9-0. Item L was adoption of a general resolution GR 20-50, a general resolution authorizing the acceptance of bid and awarding a contract, authorizing the executive director to execute a contract with Brown Construction of Northwest Florida for $1,106,821.29 to construct the Mobile Highway and Perdido Key tank discharge booster pumps, authorizing the use of the funds from several budgets. Item M, and it passed 9-0. Item M was a general resolution authorizing the acceptance of bid and awarding a general contract, authorizing executive director to execute a contract with Clear Creek Coating Limited, a new Carlisle, Ohio corporation, for $825,150 to perform tank maintenance at several sites, authorizing the use of funds from RW 817 elevated tank maintenance, and it passed 9-0. Item N was an adoption of a general resolution GR 20-52, authorizing the purchase of an outdoor chassis with a 40 cubic yard McNeilius Atlantic front loader body for the commercial division of sanitation, and it passed 9-0. Adoption of item O is adoption of a general resolution for GR 20-53, a general resolution authorizing the Emerald Coast Utilities Authority and Waste Management of Florida to enter into an agreement for the processing of recyclables at the Emerald Coast Utility Authority Materials Recycle Facility and providing effective date for that agreement. And the committee voted 9-0 in favor. Item P was a similar general resolution GR 2054 for a resolution authorizing the ECUA and Waste Pro of Mississippi to enter into an agreement for recyclables at the Material Recycle Facility. And that passed as well, 9-0. I would like to move, and I held item H, which was the general resolution to the grinder pump reimbursement program relative to Inner Island sewer system customers, and authorizing executive director to distribute those funds per the board's decision and authorize the funds from the budget CIP project CS318 non-gravity sewer connections. This was the one that was wrong on this sheet. And I held it not only for that, but we wanted to do some discussion on that before. So I'd like to move items F, G, and I through P, and hold item H for discussion.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. We're voting on all items except for H. Please vote. And it passes 5-0. You recognize Ms. Campbell.
Thank you. So item F was a adoption of general resolution GR 46. Again, a general resolution for grinder pump reimbursement program relative to Inner Island sewer system customers, authorizing executive director to distribute funds per the board's decision and authorize the use of those funds from our budget. I'm going to let Bruce tell us a little bit of background on this one, and then we'll have discussion.
Mr. Woody, you recognized.
Had my finger on it a moment ago, and now I've lost it. Hang on a second.
Page 18, I think. Does he have it corrected? Okay.
Yeah, I have the corrected one. I'm looking off the CAC, so I've got the full copy of the agenda in front of me.
Oh, okay.
That's what I can find. That's page 71. Okay. Apologies for the delay there. This resolution for grinder pump reimbursement program is for Inner Island. There was some question or concern about how it would be applied in this particular project's case in deference to how we apply it through the rest of the community. The existing system on Inarity Island is currently being replaced with a low-pressure sewer system. We've been contacted by the Inarity Island Homeowners Association Board asking if individuals getting a grinder pump can apply for the reimbursement program. Right now, there are 170 parcels that will be taken off gravity sewer and placed on the low-pressure sewer system with grinder pumps, which right now do not qualify for the grinder pump reimbursement program as is currently written, because they're already on existing gravity sewer. But there are 19 owners of parcels that have elected to switch from septic to sewer as part of the project, and because they're coming from septic, they do qualify for the grinder reimbursement program. And keep in mind, there are also 22 owners that have chosen to remain on their septic systems, and they may be eligible for reimbursement of installation of grinder pump if they connect to the low-pressure sewer system in the future, and they would be using the usually applicable reimbursement program. So they're asking to essentially apply this program for folks who are already connected to the system. While that would appease those 19, it may or may not cause an issue with the other 100 that aren't on the program. Also, because of concerns for precedence, we have staff concern for that, how that would then continue to be applied differently in the rest of the collection system. Now, we certainly acknowledge that an important issue for your policy decision is this MSBE is not typical by any means. It is very unique, and there's room there for some policy judgment that could distinguish between how it's applied here versus how it's applied in the rest of the community. But we want to bring those to your attention so that you were sensitive to those.
Do we know, Mr. Woody, what the overall cost to these homeowners is for the life of the MSBU? I think we asked that question in committee, and we didn't have that information.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Mr. Hayden's coming to the microphone.
He's the keeper of the detailed information,
Yes.
so I'll let him be more precise than I could be.
Hey, good afternoon. So the overall cost of the project is about $4.5 million, $4.7 million. That will be divided up amongst the customers, depending on if they're gravity customers going to low pressure, and they will have a different rate or cost participation as opposed to someone that is coming off a septic system and going over to a grinder pump. So it's I don't have those numbers in front of me because they are going to be different, and the project isn't closed out, so the final numbers aren't in. So it could be a little bit more in the end, but not. We don't anticipate it to be much more. We're right here at the end of the project, so any of the unforeseen conditions have been mostly identified and taken care of. So we're close to finalizing the project. We anticipate by the end of the year the project will be substantially complete.
So ballpark, what is a family going to be paying, and over what period of time?
I don't have that number in front of me at the moment, and the reason I don't is because the Board of County Commissioners is going to try to extend that repayment period, I believe, over 20 years. And I can't speak to that, but I know that's what they were discussing several months ago. The original setup, I think, was 10 years. They were talking about 15 and talking about 20. So that 4.7 million, again, that could be divided up over 20 years and versus 10 years. And so it's hard to say what each annual payment will be for the customer.
So typically, when we have sewer expansion, I see your light. Okay. When we have sewer expansion, we're not dealing with an existing customer base, as is the case here, so this makes it kind of a different animal. But for sewer expansion, we have a policy that we do what level of reimbursement for a grinder pump?
It would be $1,500 as our standard policy.
Okay. And so we're recommending not to do the $1,500 in this case because they were former customers, they had sewage.
Correct.
Before.
For those customers that were already on the gravity system or already on the Inter-Area Island sewer system before this happened, they would not, under the current rules of the program, guidelines of the program, they would not be eligible. Those customers that are, I believe there are 19 that have chosen to switch to sewer as part of this project, they would be eligible because they are coming off a septic to sewer. They would be eligible for the $1,500 reimbursement.
But the others would not.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Dr. Walker.
Madam Chairman, I added up 170 plus, I think it was 17 plus 22, that's 209. That would mean average bill, the bills would be approximately $22,000 each
And that's,
over time. And I'd just like to add that I think the people on Inter-Area Island are fortunate to be rescued by the county and by us, primarily by the county, I must say. We're fortunate to be rescued, and even this sounds like a lot of money, but it's what it cost.
Ms. Campbell, your light is on.
I was just, I had added it up as well and came up with 22,000. So if it's over 20 years, it'd be $1,000 a year. If it's over 15 years, it'd probably be about $1,800 a year, which is huge. I mean, it's like another tax bill or another insurance bill. But I agree, you know, it's the system was failing. I don't. I'm fine with the 19 people. I would like to encourage somehow the 22 people that never were septic to sewer, if we could, while all this is going on, it would just behoove us to somehow incentivize them to go ahead and do something now. Are there houses on those 22?
Some there are, some they're not.
Some they're not.
And I would like
There's
to.
not, they're not going to do it.
Yes, ma'am. I would like to reemphasize that that cost participation is not spread evenly across the board
Right.
amongst all customers. So some would be significantly higher than the $22,000, dollars. Some would be significantly less. We have been speaking with the property owners quite a bit to show them the programs that ECUA has to entice them to connect, the waiving of the impact fee for a year, the grinder pump reimbursement, and saying basically, look, we've got this, we've got a contractor on site, we can do the work, we could, connect you right up if you choose, and we've tried to throw everything at it except for the kitchen sink to make it beneficial for them to connect, and they've chosen not to for one reason or the other.
Okay, so that's the 22?
Yes, ma'am, the 22.
I did have one other question.
Sure.
Are the 19, their bill, I'm just assuming, would be much higher than the people that were already on sewer, is that correct? Or not?
No, it would actually be a little lower
Okay, okay.
for those 19.
Wow. Okay.
Dr. Walker?
I wanted to mention that the improvement in the property values of these properties would probably be dramatic. I imagine they're sort of underwater right now because of their sewage problem that they've had and had chronically for years. I'm sure they've had a difficult sales market on Inter-Area Island because of that. And once this is done, that problem will go away, and the values of these properties will probably jump quite a bit. So some of these people may get the entire $22,000 back in one fell swoop when if they sell the property. And I have no doubt that quite a few of those properties will be on the market not long after this pre-improvement is made.
Thank you, Dr. Walker. Ms. Campbell?
Well, I might agree with that on the 19. But I will not agree with that on the 170 because I'm not so sure that the fact that it was a private system was disclosed to those 170 homeowners when they bought the property, you know. And I've been working statewide on this with another government affairs committee to change that FAR bar contract because it says right now, is it septic or is it sewer? It doesn't say is it septic, sewer, grind. If it's, you know, sewer, is it a grinder? Which I think is atrocious that people would get in this situation and have a private sewer system. I hope we never see that again in this county. We've learned our lesson after what we've been through the last few years. But I will say, you know, I know there's already one lawsuit that I've heard of out there for non-disclosure, so I'm glad that it's coming to an end.
Mr. Woody?
Yeah, just a brief reminder, there's another lingering issue between the county and those residents. When the county obtained the sewer system, they also obtained quite a bit of property. And there's still ongoing discussions about the sale of that property and it being used to lower the principal cost of the system. How that transpires and over what period of time certainly is an issue still between them and the county.
Yeah, they've been discussing that, you know, do they put them all on the market at once and then deflate the prices or meet them out? But that's an asset that could go to this. Ms. Campbell?
Well, there's also a huge bulk of property in the middle that half the homeowners want to get rid of, from what I hear, and half of them want to make it into a conservation easement for the use of the HOA. So, you know, that's probably none of our business what they do with that, but I don't think it's lots already. It's just property that's bulk there in the middle that they could sell. And I think some of the homeowners want to sell and some don't, but I don't think that's really our business.
Right. Okay. Obviously, there's a concern about setting a precedent that deviates from our policy in terms of helping reimburse these people for the grinder pump. Are there any other situations like this where it may come up, where there's a private sewer system where we would be doing something similar to this? Do you know of any, Mr. Hayden?
Goodness, none immediately come to mind. No, ma'am.
So we can treat this as a separate animal and not be in danger of having to replicate this again and again in the future.
Did we not do this in Creekwood?
Creekwood was a gravity system where we had to upgrade improve the, rehabilitate some of the gravity system and upgrade the lift station. And so, that MSBU was paid solely by the residents there, and ECUA did no contribution
So did Deerfield?
to that. Correct, Deerfield as well.
And we've got one more, Hallsbury Estates?
Hallsbury is one. I think that may be the last one. But we don't have an active project in there at the moment.
So in the case of Inter-Rarity, the ECUA has no investment of dollars. Is that true? We have not funded this in any way. This is done
Correct.
through the county and through the MSBU. Certainly, we've been involved, but we did not. But we will gain these customers as a result of this sewer expansion.
Yes, ma'am. The 19 customers and potentially the next 22.
Right.
Yes, ma'am.
Right. Yeah, this is one of those things that could certainly be argued either way. I stand by the position I took in the committee that I'd like to see us help reimburse these customers for at least a portion of the grinder pump, much like our policy with other sewer expansion. We don't have a motion on the table on this, and I can't make a motion. So at this point, well, it doesn't matter. I mean, someone else can make a motion. We need a motion on this issue.
Well, I will make a motion to consider are you talking about just the 19? You want the whole 170?
Just for anyone who needs a grinder pump.
Well, that's
Yeah,
going to be all
yeah.
100 all 210, right?
That's what
Eventually.
we're discussing now, yes.
Yeah, I think we can't do it just for a few. We have to do it for all of them.
What is our normal for someone going septic to sewer?
Our policy is if it's gravity, then the impact fee's waived. If it's, grinder pump going to gravity, then septic going to grinder pump, the impact fee would be waived, as well as they would be eligible for the $1,500 reimbursement. So in total, I believe that's over $3,000.
While you're contemplating your motion, I see Mr. Beasley's light on, if you want to weigh in, Mr. Beasley.
I did. Thank you, Madam Chair. And Mr. Hayden may have covered this, but I wanted to note that when we had to do an evaluation of the inter-area progress for the county. It was actually one of the first things Mr. Woody did when he came on board was the county commissioners wanted an update on the where we've been and where we're going sort of scenario, as well as the price adjustments over time. There was a good bit of misinformation out there about ECUA had required upgrades, which caused the price to go up, and we needed to clarify that. So in that, during that investigation and preparation of those materials, in addition to the cost of the grinder pump, one of the issues that we came across that the field personnel were experiencing was a general lack of desire to locate the grinder pump on each individual homeowner property. And I don't know if Mr. Hayden spoke about that, but there's been a great deal of problems just getting the homeowners to pick a location. And that has been itself its own obstacle to buy-in, is not just price, but they just finding a spot in the very narrow setbacks between the homes to put this pump with their bushes and their mailbox and their whatever has been a true obstacle to buy-in. And I wanted to make sure Mr. Hayden mentioned that because it's more than money.
Yeah, and I did, and I'm very glad that Mr. Beasley did. It's been, to say it's a challenge is an understatement. It's been, because the way the project was initially established and designed, that was not included as part of the design. It was anticipated we would tackle that during construction. So there was a larger percentage of contingency added to the project to accommodate such a problem like this, to situate the grinder pump around the property. Because some of the sewer services laterals, they come out the front of the home, and no one wants this big grinder pump in front of their home. They want it on the side of the house, reasonably so. And that was not in the contractor's original bid, and we had to make adjustments for that.
So what was that figure?
For the adjustment, I do not have that figure. That was a change order to the contract. It was relatively low because there were some items that balanced out as a credit that we then applied toward the increase. So it was a minor change order. And I apologize, I don't have that change order amount with me.
So now I have one question for Robert. So is there are we part of any litigation on this?
Thank
Mr.
you, Madam
Beasley?
Chair and Ms. Campbell. Yes, we are still currently in litigation as a defendant in an action filed by Escambia County. And today we have an executive session report planned to discuss that litigation, such as it were. There's not much to discuss, but my intent was to update the board and kind of put the litigation in perspective of this issue. But a precursor to that conversation, which needs to be held in executive session, is that they really are separate issues. The issue with the homeowners and the grinder pump connectivity, the struggles with logistics connectivity, and the cost of connectivity is not covered by the existing Escambia County lawsuit, because it would have developed subsequent to this is a development that's subsequent to the installation of the system, whereas the lawsuit was originated back when the system, the issue was taking it over and repair.
Do you have to have when is it imperative that we make a decision on this?
The work is already being done, and this is a reimbursement, so there's, I'm sure the residents would like to say ASAP tomorrow if they can get it, but there's no deadline that would prevent us from moving forward with construction that I'm aware of.
So it could be a nice Christmas present if I hold it off. I'd like to make a motion that we table this until after we get our update and to December.
So if you will indulge me, Mr. Perkins had his light on, and
Yes,
a motion
go
to
ahead.
table is not debatable. So if you'll hold that
Okay.
thought. Mr. Perkins?
Well, what I was thinking is it would make sense to go ahead and pass the 19, to go ahead and pass that, and then to communicate to the residents out there that, hey, we might be open to funding that 1,500 for all 170 if we have no legal tie-ups. I don't want to be fighting anybody in court while I'm paying them all that money. If we can get rid of any legal tie-ups from the residents. And I don't know if we can say what the basis of the Escambia County suit is here, or we need to do that in executive session, but if it's, is it okay?
Mr. Beasley?
Thank you, Madam Chair, Mr. Perkins. Yes, the Escambia County suit originally, and then again, we're talking about an older suit, I'll get you the date, was to force ECUA to take possession and take over this system.
Yeah.
That was resolved by the engineering resolution of, okay, we will take over the system, but we have these criteria that need to be met, which led us down the pathway. And so what the Escambia County has done is they've stayed that suit because the plan has been in effect. As the plan was developed and then subsequently modified, the connectivity issue developed. And the connectivity issue, which was not part of the Escambia County lawsuit, the connectivity issue is more an individual homeowner issue. And the connectivity issue then develops to, one, does the homeowner, do they want to be connected or not? Because some people principally just do not want to be connected for one reason or another. Do they want the grinder pump if they're going to be connected, and where should it be located, and who's going to pay for it, and then who's going to maintenance it? So the connectivity issue of the system generated the subject matter that you're talking about now, which developed
So it's a different issue.
years after the Escambia County lawsuit.
So it's a different issue.
Yes,
But
yes, sir.
But the Escambia County suit, I'll get at that later since we're on this topic, but it doesn't sound like it has a lot of potential for them. I don't know, but I guess it just doesn't sound like it does. But anyways, that aside, I think it would make sense to go ahead and pass the resolution and to communicate to the neighborhood that, look, there is some interest on the board. I don't know how much, but there's some interest in helping out, but we don't want to help out, and the legal thing doesn't sound like it's a big thing. If we're being attacked legally, and we do want to help out, stick a carrot out there. If you can get 75% or so of these 22 to hook up, then we'll foot the bill for $1,500 for everybody and use a little peer pressure out there. It sounds like it's a mess already with everybody, but give them some incentive and let them decide whether or not that might be something that they want to pursue. So I don't know if that makes sense, but I'd be in favor of going ahead and passing it for the 19, so they're not held in limbo like so often happens with government, but also communicating to the people out there that, hey, there may be some chance that will help if we can come to an agreement.
Ms.
like
Perkins,
that.
I don't disagree with you on that, although I really hate to sort of piecemeal it, giving this to some of the residents there and saying, well, maybe we'll let the rest of you partake of this party, but, I think we don't have as much information as we truly need. I'd like to see the hard costs of what these people are having to pay and a breakdown between those who had sewer and those who didn't. I'd like to see, I'd like staff to look at any precedents that we are doing because, and what the overall cost will be to the ECUA if we do it for everybody. I'm inclined to do it for everybody, but I'm not used to spending money without knowing what the bill is. So I like Ms. Campbell's idea to table, or better yet, maybe to refer it to staff to get back with us with some of those numbers. I agree with many of the thoughts I've heard, but I think it's cleaner to do it all at once, just my thought.
Do we have a motion yet?
No.
Okay.
Well, you made a motion
Well,
to table, and I sort of
Yeah,
punted,
okay.
sorry.
Well, and it's 315,000 if you gave every one of them $1,500, just so, you know, but, and that's all 210, assuming the 22 decide to tie on. Or when you say you're having a hard time with them putting in the grinder pump, is it part of the 170 or is it just the 19?
It's all the customers, it'd be the 170 plus the 19, so 189 customers. It's not all 189, it's a portion thereof that would prefer the grinder pump be placed on the side of the house rather than, you know, in front. And we can certainly understand that.
What's
So-
the cost of that? Is that a cost?
That was identified in the change order per home, but again, there were some, we had some items that we could use to balance out.
To mitigate it?
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am. So.
Can you get us that figure?
Absolutely.
Okay, before we meet again, yeah, I agree. I am going to make that motion that we table this until December to have some good figures in front of us to talk about. And maybe we could have someone from the HOA here at the meeting. To,
Yeah, and if you would make it as a staff referral.
Yeah.
Rather than a table, so that they.
Yeah.
Will do
Just
their.
refer it to
their
staff.
homework. So,
Stacy, maybe a homeowner association representative could come and give us the figures. I mean, they know who's being, doesn't want and who wants.
so the motion is to refer to the items.
Yeah.
To staff to come back to our next meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and second. Further discussion? You know, I think we may, at the next meeting, when we have the whole numbers, we may say, okay, we will pay a portion of it. There's a lot more discussion that could go on once we have our arms around the whole thing. Okay, any further discussion? Ms. Campbell?
No.
Okay. All right, we're voting on the referring to staff and come back next meeting. Please vote. And it passes 5-0. Thank you. Worthwhile discussion, and we'll go at it again. Does that conclude your report, Ms.
Yeah, that concludes my report. Thank you very much.
Very much. Okay, we move now. Sorry. To the consent agenda, items 9A, B, C, D. What else? E, G, H, and I. Do I have a motion for the consent agenda, and anyone want to pull any item from this agenda? Mr. Perkins?
Move the consent agenda.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. I am going to read the items on the consent agenda into the record. And again, if you want to pull anything, you can do it at the time. Item 9A is adoption of General Resolution GR 20-55, a general resolution authorizing the purchase of a new valve insertion equipment from Consolidated Pipe Supply, Inc. in the amount of $67,105.68 for the Regional Services Department. Item 9B, adoption of General Resolution GR 2056, a general resolution authorizing the extension of the annual unit price contract with BLD Services, LLC, for sewer lateral lining and excavated repairs and providing an effective date. Item 9C, adoption of General Resolution GR 2057, a general resolution authorizing the purchase of a new mini excavator and a new skid steer loader. Christmas is coming early to Regional Services, from Coastal Machinery Company in the amount of $119,716.72 for the Regional Services Department. Item D, adoption of General Resolution GR 2058, a general resolution authorizing the Executive Director to enter into a contract with the highest bidder for the transfer of surplus Emerald Coast Utilities Authority real property located on Sanchez Lane that has been declared no longer necessary, useful, or profitable in the operation of the utility systems of the ECUA. Item E, adoption of General Resolution 2059, A general resolution authorizing the executive director to execute a contract with McKim and Creed, Inc. in the amount of $116,110 to perform the necessary field survey, data collection, and engineering work tasks for the replacement of the transit water mains in the Scenic Hills Country Club area, authorizing the transfer of projected project funds and providing an effective date. Item G, a general resolution authorizing additional engineering services by Baskerville Donovan for design modifications related to CIP project RS 121S, replacement of Char Bar Lift Station number 107. Item H, general resolution GR 20-62, a general resolution authorizing the payment of the Synergens Inc. insurance deductible invoice in the amount of $215,095 for the materials recycling facility Hurricane Sally claim filed with Florida Municipal Insurance Trust. And item I, adoption of special resolution GR 20-63, authorizing the adjustment of charges for water and wastewater service in case of breaks in water lines that occur as a result of a named hurricane, amending ECUA Code Section 2-21 and providing an effective date. Ms. Campbell? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Perkins. Did you, okay. Ms. Campbell, did you want to pull any?
No, I just
Okay.
wanted to take this time to make one disclosure.
Yes.
I've been friends with the Donovan family for probably 50-something years. I was friends with Mary Beth and John, who are the grandparents. So when my Hurricane Sally, some of you know, but not all of you, demolished my entire office on Perdido Key. I was left without an office. Fred called me up and said, "Hey, I got an office space if you want it until you can rebuild." And I said, "Well, thank you, but it wasn't my office; it was somebody else's, and it's going to take him at least a year to rebuild. So I won't take you up on a free office. Number one, you're a customer of ECUA, so I can't do that. But I will rent an office space from you. So I am." Once again, could have had a free office, but now that I sit on this board, I'm paying rent for an office to Baskerville Donovan for however long it takes to build the office back, which would probably be about 6 months to a year. So I just wanted to make a disclosure, talked about it with our attorney. He said I didn't even have to do that, but I know how this town is, so I wanted to go ahead and disclose the fact that I am renting an office from those folks. Thank you.
Okay, and you're not asking to recuse yourself? No. Okay, thank you. Mr. Woody?
I'd like to make a brief comment about item 9I. That is an adjustment for charges for water and wastewater that come about as a result of a named hurricane. One of the closing comments under section 1 was written earlier when this was prepared to put on the budget, and says that customers will be granted credit, and ECUA will track the number of adjustments and total dollar amounts in order to apply for a potential reimbursement through FEMA, if that's applicable. We have since then found out that that is not applicable, that they will not consider it. So that has changed in the time between when we submitted this to the board and the last conversation we've had with them.
Okay. So would the maker of the motion consider that as part of the recommendation under item I, that it's not
Yeah, if we-
FEMA reimbursable?
Yeah, we could either pull it or just do the consent consent agenda and strike that paragraph, however
Okay.
you guys want to do it.
That's good.
But yeah, I'll just move the consent agenda and strike
Okay.
said paragraph.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so we're voting on the consent agenda as amended. Please vote. Mr. Perkins,
I did just want to say that
Yes.
the resolution Mr. Woody just announced, I really like that, because a lot of times we have these storms, all these trees go over, there are little broken lines, and, the customers don't need to use their one-time leak adjustment for that, and they don't need to have a bunch of chaos with ECUA. It's nice to have the staff have the authority just to take care of that and use reasonable judgment in those cases.
I concur. Okay, please vote on the consent agenda. And it passes 5-0. Item 10A is the monthly budget report. Do you have anything to report to us? I didn't see you back there.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Sure.
The budget report, this is as of September 30, so that's our fiscal year end. We are still in the process of doing some adjustments and accruals, getting, ready for, to actually close the books. This reflects the majority of the expenses, however, and so what you have is water, wastewater, sanitation, and the MRF. So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer those questions. I am working also on the year-end budget adjustment that I'll be bringing back to you in November to true up the fiscal 2020 budget, to recognize any revenue that we received that we hadn't budgeted for and adjust the budget in total. So I'll be bringing that back in November.
Any questions? So when we met in May and we were looking at what COVID was doing to our community, and I think many of us were scared to death of the impact on ECUA budget and to our customers, it appears that it has not been as devastating as we anticipated it. Are you seeing many defaults in payments, a higher rate of turnoffs and that sort of thing, or can you even speak to that, Beasley?
I think we've stabilized in that area. I don't think we have, and Gabe, you might be able to help me on that. We're not seeing the delinquencies rise any further. There were some during that time period, but I think we're pretty much back on track. When the COVID thing first happened, the focus that we had was kind of on what's going to happen with the water, wastewater. With businesses closed and, that kind of thing, we were concerned that we would see a reduction in the water revenues. However, we have not seen a reduction in the water revenues. In fact, we've got more revenue than we budgeted, and that's a good thing.
Yeah.
So the water fund is fine. It's the sanitation that we didn't really think about being impacted by COVID, but it was because of the increased volume of trash that people were putting out. If they were home more, they were producing more trash. And so we saw an increase in the volume of trash being picked up, which caused greater tipping fees for sanitation. So the costs actually increased significantly in the sanitation fund, which is not really what we thought about at first.
Right.
So the sanitation and the MRF fund are going to probably end up in the red for fiscal 2020. We did have a little increase in the revenue that we hadn't budgeted. We collected more than we had budgeted. However, that's offset by that increase in expenses in the tipping fees and overtime, those other things that we've been talking about all year long, the overtime, the gas and oil, and the tipping fees. So that's about where we're going to end up. So sanitation and MRF will most likely be in the red, but the water fund is going to be fine.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I guess we none had a crystal ball back then.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Anyone else have questions for Ms. Shelton? Okay, thank you
Thank you.
very much. The next item is the Executive Director's report. Mr. Woody?
On your agenda are listed two items. I actually have three. I'll get to the third one here in a moment, but first, the two that are listed. First is notification of emergency award of contract. I provided some information in a recent board report to inform the board that we have a air quality problem over on the second floor of the building just across the street. And apparently it is a outcome of some remodeling that was done a number of years ago. When that was done, some of the cinder block outer wall was broken in a few places to accommodate some electrical conduit. Unfortunately, that allowed migration of air up the outside walls. When that happens, that can pick up condensation. That condensation then behind the walls of that lined the inside of that office space, then started growing some mold. and that created an issue. So we needed to address that for the health and safety of the staff, and I authorized to go ahead and proceed with work to remediate that right away, as mentioned in an earlier board report. So this is official notification of that. On November 17th at your next board meeting, you'll actually have two resolutions come before you. One is going to be for official award of this contract. The other, also on November 17th, will be the award and bid of replacement of that interior wall once remediation is done. This memo mentions that that's in progress. In the few days, even since we've completed that, we have received bids. That'll be in the approximate amount of $68,900. If no questions, item number B. You'll remember that resolution number 20-45 was earlier approved by this board for project over on Mobile Highway for replacement of 12-inch water main near the intersection with Beulah Road. That project was a priority because we've had a series of breaks, consecutive breaks in that area, and we wanted to address it right away. We thought the higher importance in terms of accelerating the project was to still go through our full 21-day advertisement in order to receive the most competitive bid that we can receive, but to shortcut time a little bit by getting pre-approval for award. This board granted that as long as it did not exceed $500,000. This notification says that we received 3 bids, lowest bid being $334,000 and change. They were given a notice to proceed on October 21st, and the contractor is actually on site as we speak. So thank you for that prior authorization so we could be responsive to that need. The third item that was not listed is a diversity report. Located on your table in front of you is a memorandum with a number of attached tables, actually 8 tables of information. And you'll hopefully remember that during unfinished business on your July 28th ECUA Board Meeting, a request was made that ECUA staff assess the current status of minorities in the workplace by department and review minority compensation, overall salaries, and to develop a long-range recruitment and mentoring plan, as well as address and take a look at our processes for minority contractor and subcontractor procurement. It was asked that we return this by October, and that's the subject of this memorandum. A little bit of background information. First, it's always kind of good to know where we draw our employees from in the first place. We serve a captured audience here in Escambia County. Our employees actually come from a wider range than that. 79% of those come from this service area in Escambia County. And you can see by the percentages on the first page there, we still have almost 21% come from locations outside of Escambia County. When making comparisons between our demographics of our employees and the demographics of Escambia County, we drew statistical information from Escarosa Career Center. These were actually statistics a little hard to come up with. The availability of the information in the level of detail that we have of our own staff isn't quite there. So we're still searching for better, more thorough and detailed information than what we currently have for background demographics. But we're very rich with information for our own employee data that we're able to slice and dice in many different ways. Yeah, we're getting ready to come up with a 2020 decennial census, so we're hopeful for a good set of up-to-date information coming out here in the not too distant future as well. Starting on page 2 is a breakdown of some of the key questions that have been asked and we've identified as part of our initial review. First off, relevant to race, if you compare ECUA staff with Escambia County, our ECUA, the white population of our employees is actually underrepresented at 58% compared to 69% in the county at large, and overrepresented in the Black African American community at 37% for ECUA compared to 23% in the background county. The other minorities, Hispanic, American Indian, Asian, are relatively close given the single-digit numbers that we're talking about. But that changes when you start to look about how those populations are spread across our organization. If we take an initial split just at the pay grade 29, which is kind of the dividing line between our hourly employees and our exempt salaried employees, the 58% number of the white population, when you talk about salaried, suddenly jumps all the way up to 83%. Similarly, going the opposite direction, our Black and African American population, it stands at 37% overall, drops to 12 in salaried positions, and there are corresponding increases on the non-exempt. So we, while we may be overrepresented in some areas, that disparity becomes quite evident when you talk about pay and compensation. In terms, or where those positions are located in the organization as opposed to pay, excuse me. When you further look at sorts based on race by department, by the way, I've made reference, I've just pulled out a few of the ones that are probably get your attention more than others. There's a multitude of additional subsorts that are in the tables that follow behind the ones that I'm talking about here. When you stop to talk about gender, as you would expect in the general population, male and females just on either side of 50% for both, but in our ECUA family, you'll see that it's 20% female and 80% male. Interestingly, when you subdivide that or do a secondary sort and look at the difference female to male between, again, that exempt and non-exempt, the female population jumps up from 20 to 30. It's still nowhere near 50, but it does increase when you talk about salaried positions or the more higher paid positions. Education, we're fairly comparable for those folks in the general population. Those who have a high school degree or higher is 91% in the county, and relatively similarly at 89% here at ECUA. For a bachelor's degree or higher, however, that drops considerably, only to 11% compared to a background of 26% in the county. A few key findings I'd like to point out. Some of those I did as we went through some of those numbers, but generally, Black and African American employees are overrepresented as a whole in the organization, but significantly underrepresented in more senior, high-paid positions. In our non-exempt positions, the hourly positions, African Americans are overrepresented in customer service, human resources, down at our MRF, regional services, and sanitation divisions. But in the exempt positions, our white staff members are overrepresented in departments like engineering, finance, maintenance and construction, shared services, water production, and water reclamation. Also, females are underrepresented in the fields of engineering, maintenance and construction, the MRF, regional services, sanitation, listing most of the department's shared services, water production, and water reclamation as well. There are some influences, I believe, that are represented in those statistics that are influenced by the amount of education, either required by the position or by the applicants as well. This is a small glimpse into some of the issues that we've identified. There's a lot more in the tables that follow, but they all boil down to the subject of dealing with diversity and inclusion. On the subject of diversity, that's really has to deal with the who and what in our organization, who's already an employee, who's being recruited, who's being promoted, and how that tracks comparison with our local demographics. Some approaches that I would propose to help improve our diversity amongst our staff. First and foremost, we need to have a program to regularly measure where we are and how that's changing over time. If we don't have a yardstick put on it, then you can't track how changes are occurring, be they good or bad. We certainly need to recruit over a broader geographic area. That will vary a lot based on position, training, education needs, et cetera, and the type of recruiting or the locations to recruit will vary as well. But that will help increase our pool of qualified candidates. We need to take a deep dive into breaking down salaries by race and gender as well to see how we stack up, to make sure we don't have pay stub discrimination, issues where we have people of equal job description, equal education requirements, et cetera, relatively equal years of service, but not necessarily equal rates of pay. We work on increasing retention. Those are important aspects. If somebody is in our organization and they don't feel like they have the ability to climb the ladder in their particular desired area, aren't given opportunities, don't see diversity on the rungs of the ladder ahead of them, they're less likely to stay in our organization. So conducting employee satisfaction surveys, exit interviews, we already do some exit interviews, but add some additional questions more focused on diversity as well. It gives better insight on why people stay and why we sometimes lose good employees. Certainly need to discuss more diversity training in general, teach that to our staff so we understand best how that benefits the organization and helps create a more welcoming environment for employees and our customers alike. And we also need to foster diversity at all levels, especially as we've seen in some of these statistics in the more senior and responsible positions. Employees, again, need to see that in the upper levels of the organization, there is much opportunity for them as where they might be in other locations throughout the organization. But diversity isn't the only issue that needs to be addressed. The subject of inclusion is an important aspect of that as well. They really do go hand in hand, and those are sometimes the issues that are a stumbling block to a better program. Inclusion are the behaviors that welcome, embrace those diversity. We need to pay attention to organizational culture. Does it improve inclusiveness? Do the attitudes and actions in the workplace support what we're trying to accomplish, or are they divisive? Are all welcome? Are all groups welcome? Implicit bias training is an important aspect as well. Each and every one of us, whether we want to admit it or not, have certain stereotypical biases just based on our own upbringing or where we were raised or who we were around as we grew up. Those influences we need to be aware of, how it affects our dealings with our coworkers, how it affects our decision-making when we're recruiting and hiring and promoting individuals in the organization. Many times those are unconscious, but if we talk about them, train about them, they'll be less likely to have as dramatic effect. We also need to continue to proactively survey our staff again and be sure that we are providing equal access to opportunities and resources for our staff. A few other minor items. We need to be sure that our current applicant pool is broad. We need to be sure that we better equip our employees for upward movement. We have a good tuition reimbursement program. Do we adequately promote it, even to the point of being sure that our supervisors and even mid-level managers are bringing it to the attention of folks that we see in the organization that have the potential to rise up, and encouraging that and discussing those types of opportunities during performance appraisals. Be sure that our minimum qualifications for each job classification are job related. They don't create unnecessary barriers for someone climbing the ladder. and then certainly have a good understanding and analysis of how ECUA is perceived in terms of valuing diversity. That could be some surveying of our customers as well and how they perceive us as an organization, because that's where our applicant pool mostly comes from as well. A related question that was in the original request was also a little bit of feedback on the procurement code. We do have requirements within our procurement code and processes we go through to be sure that we are marketing ourselves to women-owned business enterprises and minority business enterprises, as well as small business enterprises for that matter, MBE, WBE, SBE, as the acronyms are used. We do have a non-discrimination and solicitation requirements page that is a part of every solicitation. That's actually attached on page 6 and talks in a fair amount of detail, a whole page worth actually, about the process we go through to help encourage and promote not only prime contractor but subcontractor procurement to MBE and WBE businesses. As a further outreach, we also have for some time held quarterly meetings as an outreach tool to MBE, WBE companies. In fact, the program's called How to Do Business with the ECUA. We certainly benefit by creating a larger pool of potential bidders to our projects, so we try to help them deal with the intimidation factor of bidding for a public unit of government. There's extra paperwork. A lot of folks are put off by that or shy of that. But if through training programs like that, we help increase the pool of folks that we have available for bidders. In conclusion, this memorandum is it's only an introduction. But there's quite a bit of good information to start from. We need better demographic information from our community to be able to sort, subsort some of that data to make better comparisons with our own. So we'll continue to seek that out. There's really a short-term and a long-term response. The short-term are some of the easier ones, the training issues, dealing with our existing job descriptions and making analysis with the data we have within our own community. Some of the larger ones will take a period of time. We didn't get to where we are now over a short period of time, and it does take a little bit of time as vacancies occur in the organization due to retirements, promotions, and attrition. But every one of those motions, and some of that happens every single day, are opportunities to improve where we are now to get to a better position. I'd like to thank Kim Scruggs, who prepared the tables that accompany this, and she and I will be working together to segue into the HR department heading over this as a larger program, and will necessarily require additional feedback and reports in the future as we make progress.
Mr. Woody, I thank you for this. I think it gives us a great benchmark for where we are. I don't sense that we have a culture like we hear about in the horror stories of the press, but we know that it can improve, and the mentoring and all of the other steps that you've outlined can be taken to make us stronger. And I think the first step is knowing where we are, and everybody having buy-in that this is important to all of us. And it sounds like both you and Ms. Scruggs will have ownership in this process, and this is just a beginning, and we will have measurable goals. And I applaud you for taking this as seriously as you have, and thank you. Ms. Campbell.
Thank you. I appreciate this report as well, and I think communication is a big key. I know that Mr. Roberts is out there constantly talking up ECUA, and that's a great thing. When COVID was here, I know you couldn't do that, and I know that you recently did something out there with Santa Rosa businesses and Scambia businesses, and I think that's a great thing. I think anytime that we can get in front of a group, especially a group of leaders. So I personally nominated Randy Sear for the leadership Pensacola program this year, and he was voted in. So I think that's a wonderful thing. I'd like to see our organization put someone in that leadership program every year. It puts them in front of 50 other leaders in our community so that they get to learn a little bit more about ECUA just because they got to hang out with you for a whole year. And I can't think of anybody better to hang out with them than Randy. He's doing a great job. I'd like to see all of our people go through Leadership Pensacola at some time. And I would be remiss if I didn't shout out, as always, to Mr. Piscopo, who worked with the high schoolers at Catholic High School on their robotics. We may change that engineering because we had one lady that went through that program who just loves Jerry Piscopo, talks about him all the time, and she just got accepted full paid engineering scholarship at the Mississippi State University, so maybe she'll come back and work with you, Jerry.
Thank you. If there's no other discussion for this, we go to the attorney's report, and I believe at this point we'll go into recess to have our litigation report. If you want to tell us how we proceed with that, Mr. Woody. Or, Mr. Beasley, do you want to be recognized?
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, at this time, I would ask that I be allowed to update the board on several matters in an executive session format. We have prepared the executive session meeting room to be the upstairs conference room, just to allow for, rather than the downstairs conference room, to allow for greater spacing. There is a court reporter up there. The session will include a discussion of the Riles grassing litigation and settlement agreement. It would also include an update on the Inner Island litigation filed by the county, although I've briefly discussed that, and the details related to that have already been discussed in this matter, but I'll cover that briefly. A status report on the THCV ECUA mediation, and an evaluation of the claim potential against Skanska for the impact on the commercial sanitation expenses. Those would be the items. The people in attendance would be the members of the board, as well as Mr. Woody and myself. The question was whether Mr. Hayden needed to be there for the Inner Island portion, but I believe at this point he has covered the portion that he would cover as it relates to the grinder pump, and so I do not think that he would need to be there for that portion. So I anticipate it'll take no more than 30 minutes, likely less, and so if we could adjourn to go into executive session, then we will come back.
So we're going upstairs, and there you can use elevators or the stairs. I know, right? We're still waiting for Mr. Perkins.
Oh, that's right.
So we will resume our meeting, and the recess is concluded. Let me take care of this one piece of business, Ms. Campbell. I will entertain a motion to approve and authorize Mr. Woody to sign the settlement agreement with Riles Grassing. Will someone make that motion? Ms.
I
Campbell?
will make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any further discussion? Please vote. And it passes 5-0. And we're still in the attorney's report. Do you have anything further to report, Mr. Beasley?
Madam Chair, I have no further report. Thank you.
Then we have nothing under unfinished. Ms. Campbell, yes, you're recognized.
While we were on attorney report, I just wanted to say thank you to our attorney and to Randy Sears. We had a little incident come up where somebody got into one of our well, it wasn't even an easement, it was a piece of property that we owned, and started clear cutting it. And the neighbors all freaked out, gave me a call and said, "Hi, they're clear cutting the property, your property." And Randy went out and Robert addressed it, and they allowed the homeowner association and the builder to come up with their own agreement. So no legal, no lawsuit, no anything. They all came up and agreed that they would plant the proper trees. And so it turned out to be really good, and I just appreciate that. No
Fantastic.
litigation.
Fantastic. Government gets a bad rap when we do things like that. It just shows what we can do. Thank you for sharing that. We have, no one has asked for anything under unfinished business. Is there anyone who wishes to add something? I see nothing under new business. Board communications. Does anyone have something to communicate? Ms. Campbell.
One quick thing, if you have a pool and it has a liner, get it checked. I had a pool full of debris after the hurricane, so I had my liner checked. And the guy said, "Well, I don't think this happened during the storm. I think you have a couple of little holes here, that happened in the storm, but there's another little hole right here." And I fixed all of it, and my water bill went down. So apparently I had I had 12 little holes that were causing damage. And who knows if they happened during the storm or before the storm or after the storm. But if you have a liner, get it checked because you might save some money.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. Anyone else under board communications? We come to open forum. Has anyone asked to address us in open forum? Okay. Then we are adjourned. Go vote.